Hi, everyone. My name is Jason. Joining me is Shanka Day, Senior Director at Salesforce. And we are here to talk about getting rapid early career growth, specifically the three actions that Shanka outlined, and a few more. So here's what we're going to roll on today. It's a Maven Lightning lesson, so we're going to keep it quick and concise. We'll cover about us, these key actions, and then we'll take some live Q&A, which is always fun. Okay, speed through run for me. No idea what I want to do in high school and college, so I did 7 internships. Got into digital media, marketing, advertising. Went from assistant media planner, managing 0 people, to VP in 7 years. Managed 40 people, $400 million plus marketing budget, P&L ownership. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of stress. It was a lot of learning. And then I was an advisory board member. Then went to Amazon. Thought I would be there for 20 plus careers, 20 plus years. I really liked it there. Then did something crazy and went to this startup founding team with a band of crazy pirates, raised 8 million seed. And now I'm the COO at Level Up with Ethan. But enough about me. Shanka, take us through yours.
Well, I did 0 internships because I knew exactly what I didn't want to do, which were internships. I pretty much spent most of that time traveling when I was in school. And then I got into Bitcoin mining, did 2 years at Goldman. I then started a startup when I was in New York in visual search, very similar to Google Lens. Then I spent about 7 years at different parts of the AI stack at Microsoft, and the last 3 years at Salesforce. And pretty much I've been working in the AI space across different parts of the stack over the last 10 years.
Awesome. It's funny. I did a lot of internships. You did no internships. You did the startup early on. I did the startup more recently.
Yeah.
And now you're at a big company, and I'm at a tiny company with Ethan.
Yeah, you
So
never
it's
know. I might leave soon and get into it again.
okay. There we go. All right. Topic number 1. So I asked Shanka to outline what were 3 big things you did early on that you thought helped, and Shanka put it into a good list. So this is number 1: picking up hard problems. So Shanka, the sub bullet 1, inheriting big messes. Can you take us through how did you inherit these big messes, and then I guess more importantly, how did you fix them?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you inherit them, sometimes you find them and you take the ownership to fix them. But in general, anywhere you see, at least the way I did it was they're never random. They're usually systemic failures. So you have to really look at what the technical problems are, what the organizational issues are that might have created it. Not necessarily like toxic, but there's just organizational disconnects, and then the overall impact that it's having. So you just look at all of those things, talk to customers, frontline workers, customers, and and look at the data you have, like in logs, in reviews that come in, feedback that comes in, and you can, if you look for things there, you find these problems lying all around. Even like if you look at YouTube comments about your product, you can find things there. So the way to do it is, the way I did it was to really try and map like what the root causes were. And once I had that map of where the biggest fires were, the next step was to essentially build a coalition, right? You want to find out who really cares about this problem. Does the problem need to be fixed? When you inherit the problem, it's slightly different because somebody knows that there's a certain degree of problem here, but they don't know the scale of it. When you identify a problem that needs to be fixed, then you need to have proper support to get that solved, which means you need to find out who will resist that change, who will become your champions, and then find those key stakeholders, bring them together. And then the next step is to create like big wins. Not necessarily big in the sense that it's the task itself is going to be big to fix it, but it's a win that shows that you're directly addressing the pain point. And each win should create new capabilities that the organization can then like sort of scale out from there. And the other thing, I'm relatively a lazy person, which means if I have a problem in front of me, I will do whatever I can to not have to deal with that problem all the time, which means I'll find ways to automate it. I'll find ways to work myself out of the job. So
Mhm.
that's pretty much, and that's a very key thing. Like most of the problems that I picked up or inherited, it was because people were doing things manually, managing things and with
Mhm.
duct tapes. And I figured out how to solve it systematically so that I wouldn't have to do that thing going forward. So yeah, so I think those are the different steps to handle those big messes. And the reason I chose this big mess, maybe this is an interesting thing. About 10 years ago, I read something at HBR that most people who get elevated to higher ranked roles do one of three things. They either go small to go big, which means they go join a startup, or you inherit a big role early in your career, or you just get into this trajectory of identifying big messes and solving them. And I felt this third one was easy enough to do. So I always looked for those problems and as I solved more and more, I got more and more of such opportunities later on.
Okay, so a few things that you called out that I'm interested in. Number one, early in your career, how did you think about reading HBR articles? Because most early career people I meet don't. So I'm just curious, how did you get on that path?
It's probably a little random because I think I was always interested in getting an MBA. I didn't really know what it meant, but thought I wanted to get an MBA just to expand the horizons of what I wanted to learn. And a good way of learning to think that way was to read HBR articles.
Mm.
Like it's very, very concise. It's very playbook oriented. So it was just like I would read anything else. I'm a voracious reader, so just like I read anything else, I read whatever articles I could get my hands on. So yeah, just coincidentally, that's something that crossed my desk, and I like the virtual desk, so to speak, and that's how I came across these articles. I mean, I sought them out
Okay,
in a sense, but yeah, I mean, nothing special, I would say.
okay, that makes sense. The I want to do a big plus one on the customer emails or reading customer complaints, support, tickets, etc., whatever you want to call it. There was a Amazon VP that I worked closely with while I was there, and he said, with customers, you learn the good, the bad, and the creative. And by the creative, he meant if you look deeply enough, they could almost pretty much help you plan your product roadmap, right? Um, so for me, it was important to consume that information on a daily basis. Set up like a automated feed, etc., email, and then get out of the building and actually talk to customers. Okay, so I'm curious on this question.
Hmm.
When you're consuming this like this high volume of data and you see a lot of things that can be fixed, blah blah blah, how do
Mhm.
you decide which one to go after? Because you can go after a lot. So
Great
how do you
question.
what's that judgment?
Yeah, if you think about it, um, hopefully all of you are familiar with this idea of Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3 thinking. So it's really a question of thinking in terms of systems, not just the symptoms, right? So you have to scan across these horizons and see what is a problem today versus what will be a problem if we 10x our business. And this is literally the first problem I solved at Microsoft was literally this. So there was a system internally that worked for online controlled A/B tests. So there, when I first joined, or maybe 2 months before I joined, they used to run maybe tens, maybe hundreds of tests a month. Around the time I joined, those tests went up like 10,000 different tests, A/B tests were being sent out every month. And the system broke and there was no system as such. It was a ragtag group of tools across 10 different orgs that were like sort of tied together. So when the system broke was when the scale hit a certain number. So uh, you really have to look for those systems and understand where and when those systems might become a problem. It might not be a problem today. It might be a problem a year from now, 3 years from now. So you approach those differently. And the second thing is you have to understand every problem gets evaluated through two lenses: the financial or business impact of the problem and the strategic alignment of the problem with the business overall. So the leading indicators are like support ticket volume, frustration you might hear in one-on-ones if you talk to customers, churns, all of that. So so you really have to look for those signals, and you have to sort of build a radar to sense that this kind of problem. Like I was talking about, like reading YouTube comments, Twitter threads, X threads, all of these feedback that comes in from customers. Once you start looking at these and you start then prioritizing across these sources, you really have to then decide the biggest problems are the ones that might look like they're very expensive to fix until they become really expensive to ignore. So, and there's a anecdote I have here that I can share later on, but essentially you're looking for things where you want to find, first of all, that it is strategically aligned. Number two, you want to find, and by strategically aligned, it means you have some priorities already set in the company's plan that you can tag it on to. And number two, you can sort of define what the business impact will be. I'm saying sort of because sometimes that's hard to do, and you really have to work to change those anecdotes into proper metrics that might make sense for the business. Uh, Let me know if that answers the question. I can dive it a little deeper later on if needed.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. At Amazon during performance reviews, there were two big criterias. One was the results you delivered, the business impact, but number two, also how did you deliver that, right? And that dived into the complexity of the problem, the cross-functional stakeholders, et cetera. So it matches with what you just outlined. Okay, last question on this topic, and then we'll move on. You mentioned during our pre-chat before the Zoom that you used your company as almost like a startup platform. How did you do that? Because you were at big companies, so I think that's a powerful skill. Take us through that.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it's about thinking that everything you have in the company is a set of resources at your disposal. If you restrict yourself to your current organization, or you ask for permission to do things where you are right outside where you are right now, they're not really leveraging the whole company. It was something that Satya said whenever around the time I joined Microsoft. I think he became CEO at the same time. So he said something like, use the company as your platform to do your best work. And I think that really stuck with me. Like somehow, like I started looking at, again, that one sentence in practice, in action, becomes much more complicated. So what you really have to do is you have to map the organizational structure. You have to know like the political landscape, budget cycles, how decisions are made, who controls what assets, all of that. But if you think about it, if you see a capability in another part of the company that you think we could do something with, like you could make it an external product, or you could take that and take another feature and another capability somewhere else, and you think you can create a new capability, a new process, or a new product out of it, or a new business out of it, then that's really what you want to do. You look for organizational adoption, understand the organization architecture, and of course, you take stock of the assets you have technologically, financially, business development wise, and you see what you can do across all of this. And there is definitely, you have to build coalition networks. I think I keep coming back to this, especially at big companies. Like you have to build these coalition networks where people are, where you have early champions or people who will open up the way for you. And especially in working
Mm,
product, this is a harder thing to achieve, because in product you don't really have creative control over a lot of different things. You don't can't really take 3 engineers out of your team, or 5 engineers out of another team, and try to get them to put on a problem that you think you can solve and make a dent with. You really have to have an ally in engineering who you have to convince, and then you work together with them. So I think this is something you really have to work on to get into the frame of mind where you can convince people that your idea is really their idea. They become co-owners of what you're doing, and then you can use the entire full vertical strength of your company to build new things. I think Ethan has talked about this in the past. I have done this in a similar way at Salesforce as well. Like when I had to do something very quickly, I went and took something that was completely different in a completely different part of the company, and I could tie it back to the outcome that I wanted to create. And this is not even technical. This was like a business deal that I had to create to get something to market quickly. So it's really a question of not waiting for permission,
Mm.
identifying what assets exist across the company, and being able to tie those points together.
I love that term, coalition networks, because it's so true. And the best way to get approval or buy off on something is to show the early wins that the seeds can flourish into a big tree, right? And then that's how you onboard allies and blah blah blah. And so it's just a downward momentum. That makes sense. Um, okay, let's go to this one. Uh, act like an API. Okay, so first of all, where did you learn how to do this, or did it just come naturally?
I think it was just something I picked up as I was doing my work. So I was stuck in between teams that didn't really talk to each other.
Mm,
For most of my problems that I started solving. Like from the beginning, I was thrown into problems and by luck, where that required me to work across multiple different teams. And I realized my main job was to translate the language. Like they're all speaking English, but you have to translate the
mm.
language from of one team to another into an incentive for the other team to become co-owners and solve it. So, and same across functions. You have to translate technical details into a business term or a marketing term so you can get these people to work together. So often the problem wasn't technical complexity, it was like human disconnect. So just as part of
Mm.
the work, I've noticed this is something that had to be done, clarifying the needs, framing the trade-offs, proposing how teams would shake hands and get these things done. And I just started doing it as part of it.
I think, especially early and mid career, this is probably one of the strongest muscles you can build early on because you become that interconnected spoke that is the trusted voice. And you said, I mean, a lot of people experience, when two or more teams don't see eye to eye or get along. Um, what do you think most people get wrong about this? Because a lot of people try to do this, but they're not very successful.
I would say the biggest, essentially, your question is like, what would you have to do correct to onboard
Mm,
these other teams onto your idea, right?
yeah.
Uh, it's really a question of framing it as solving their problem and framing it in a way that all of them feel like co-owners, right? It's not like my
Mm,
idea, I'm trying to get them onto something. Everybody gets to share in the credit. Everybody gets to share in the uh, ultimately the impact that the business has, the product has or the change has, and you don't overpromise. Like, and you have to show you're serious, which means you have to do the upfront
mm,
work that they might not be willing to do. Whether it's a question of calculating metrics by hand,
mm.
doing some prototypes for them. So there were moments when I came from an engineering background, so I could write code. Sometimes if I had to make a change, I would go and make the change in the code base. And I said, look, this is
Mm,
what it might look like. And I'm serious about this. And if you can do this together, it's in your favor and to get out of like generals, let's say if I get this product out to market, and this is a mobile first product, then you get to release the first mobile first product from Microsoft on Outlook that has AI search in it, right? So sort of you frame it as a win for them. I think if you go in guns blazing and you sort of treat them as like sales targets, not as partners,
mm,
right? If you try to pitch and posture without really listening to what they're expecting, that's where things start falling. And it's not easy to do. Like even I still make the mistake at different levels, at different levels of complexity, where I try to say what to do versus getting them together. And it is a
mm,
time-consuming process in many cases. But it is not like and I would say one other thing I would add is being an API is not the same as being a middleman. You're
mm.
you're really trying to, what you really have to do. Otherwise, if you're a middleman, you're just forwarding messages. You're an email, you're not API, right? What you're really doing is you're adding context, you're adding details that translates every single team's chaos into a clarity for another team. And ultimately, all of these teams, when they individually gain clarity, that's when the overall project, the overall across orgs, everybody gets clarity as to what they have to do. And more
That last point's very
scales
good.
up. Yeah. Then more this scales up across multiple different orgs. Like at this point, I'm running a project at Salesforce that across like 8 different orgs. Each org has their own GM, their own revenue and balance sheet. And it's like super tough to like get these guys to work together when incentives at the company level are not aligned for these guys to work together. So that's a different story, but it just gets to a different level of complexity, but it's always fundamentally the same first principles problem of framing it in each other's
Mm,
success terms.
okay, that makes sense. I like it. Actually, I would retitle this "Act Like an API, Not an Email" because that's a good zinger. Okay, let's go on to the next one. If my slide will move, let's
This
see.
reminds me of one other thing I
There
want
we
to
go.
add. When you're working with
Yeah, go ahead.
going with this complex problems, I do this thing that I call a controlled breakdown. What that means is sometimes you know a problem is going to break. And you know that shit is going to hit the fan. But people will only realize that it is a problem when you let the shit hit close to the fan. And so often I would let things break and break and break, and then I come in at the last one when people are starting to feel the pain, when they really understand it is too expensive to not fix. And then I would go in and get everybody together to fix it. This is something I learned to do at Microsoft. It's not always ideal, but I think this really helps because not always you're going to succeed at everything that I said you're going to have to do. Whether you act as an API and you try to take up these big messy problems, you really have to find a way to see people feel the pain, so they can then they'll automatically line up behind you when you're trying to solve it.
I like that, and I agree with that. I have to ask, where did you learn that? Did a manager tell you? Did you read it?
No, this one I learned from one of my managers. Like
Mm,
when I first working, he was my skip manager when I first started at Microsoft, and I started reporting to him about 2, 3 years in. And this is something that he taught me because every time I would try to jump in and try to solve a problem, I said, no, 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 let's let it be. Let them feel the pain, and it'll automatically start. You save yourself the heartache and headache, maybe of months of dealing with organizational ambiguity. So yeah.
I love that. It's interesting. A common let's call it situation that we often hear is my manager told me not to jump in and help that team or person. But sometimes they don't get context as to why. Then there could be very many things, right? But what you just outlined could be one of the reasons that the
Mhm.
leadership or your skip manager is saying, look, don't help them yet because they need to understand XYZ. So that's a good part. There's always a deeper reason. If you don't get good context or reason, always prompt your manager for it. There's
Yeah.
there may be levels as to how much they want to disclose to you because it could be a little bit more sensitive in some cases. But yeah, that's a great point. I love that. Okay, let's do the last two ones. Pretty speed run. Uh, Asking for what you want. It sounds so simple, but so many people don't do this. And number two, don't do this artfully. So take us through how do you do this well?
Uh, First of all, I think it's a question of creating enough value for the other person, whether it's your manager or a manager's peer in another team. You want to deliver on something meaningful and build your credibility first. And once you're adding value, the way it came about the first time was a manager told me I was put into work I didn't want to do, and I saw it as a dead end, and I sort of lashed out at my manager at the time, and he listened to me quietly and he said, "Listen, this is all work I have to get done, but if you get it done, then I'm gonna get you what you want." And I realized, okay, I could have asked him the same thing a little more nicely, and he would have probably done the same thing for me. I think that's when it started dawning on me, and then. Uh, Once I felt I had created enough signal to say this person is adding value at and beyond that level, then I started asking more directly, like, like, okay, am I getting promoted, or what would it do to make that happen? And it was, and if the answer was no, I would always take the no for now, and like what would have to change in 3 months, 6 months to for that to change. So I was always very upfront with like what I wanted to do, how much I wanted to make, and I was not doing, nobody was doing me charity. I was not doing anybody charity. So it was all a question of, and it was not my manager's money either way. So it was really being able to like have that direct conversation, but only do it when you have created value, have enough signal that you've created value. So I would summarize all of that into that paragraph.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one mistake is people ask this too early when they don't have the reputation or credibility. And number two, the best time to ask it is after you've done consistent wins and then ideally after a big win, because then you have the momentum, etc.
Yep.
And the
And
third thing you brought up that I think is very important, I was just say, is you always kept it forward, future looking. What can I do in 3 months? What can I do in 6 months? Instead of retroactively, that comes
correct.
off as sometimes defensive. You want to be future forward. That's how you are seen as open to feedback. What were you
Yeah.
gonna add?
I was going to say, once you have a clear signal of trust, like that's when you want to bring this up. And I've also been in a situation where I asked a manager and he said no. And he said, I'm not convinced that I want to promote you, but I will create the package for you. I said, I don't want you to promote me if you're not convinced. So so I waited another 6 months and then I got promoted because then I did whatever he said I had to do and he figured the rest of it out. It's all a question of looking it in the future
Mm,
versus making it retroactive.
exactly. Okay. This next one, let's go through a speed run because you have some interesting things here. But additional advice, bonus stuff, train your emotions. I heard there's something about acting that goes into this. So tell us that.
Oh, this was because I think I pretty much sucked at talking in front of people for the longest time, and I always dealt with very high emotions at Microsoft with lots of people. The acting was a way of learning how to be present in the moment with whatever you're getting, and doing your best with what you're getting. And um, acting lessons, I don't know how many of you have done it. You're essentially in a scene where your partner can throw anything at you and you have to take it and turn it and still get the end result that the script demands you get to, but your partner might do it in a completely different way. So acting taught me how to be present with whatever emotions and words I was getting in the moment. And uh, I got into it because my dad used to be a stage actor. I kind of always wanted to do it.
Oh.
When I started doing it, I realized this was not only fun, it was also useful at work. So it is, yeah, so sounds like improv. That's definitely, but it was next level. There's a technique called Meisner, Meisner, Meisner technique. It's like next, it's not just yes and, but something beyond that. Like they
Mm.
literally break you down and break down your reflexes to different things and build you back up with that. So that's where I felt I trained my emotions like I would train for anything else, like my product sense or design or development. So it's essentially a skill that you can. Yes, I was ruminating when I was emotional. Uh, this was to answer the question from Santi. Yes, I used to ruminate a lot. Uh, uh, the only thing I can tell you in this short time frame is you really have to break between a stimulus and your response to the stimulus, there's a gap. And you have to put a hook into that gap. And then you have to change the behavior over there. And you have to do it enough number of times that your behavior changes. So that's what it's called. And there's a book about it that I'm forgetting the name on. That really is very good on teaching you how to do this. But it's really a question of being able to break yourself down, break your responses down. That's because of like past social conditioning and all of that, and and create new responses from your system.
It's hard to believe that you were a poor public speaker at one point because you're very good now.
Oh, thank you. Anyway, there's a question
Yeah.
I just noticed on somebody. Do you want me to answer it now?
Yeah, go for it.
So did the MBA give you credibility, authority, reputation? Did it progress your trajectory or depress it? Uh, the MBA gave me none of those three things. No authority, no credibility, no reputation. What it did give me was the ability to speak different languages of different functions. And it did give me a solid network of people that I otherwise wouldn't have met as part of my regular day-to-day activities. Um, it did help me in my trajectory because right around the time I was getting the MBA, I started choosing problems, and I was lucky enough to work with somebody who could create the space for me for that. I started choosing even more difficult problems that are not just technical or product, but really veered into market positioning and pricing and all of that. So I couldn't have done a good job at those things if I didn't have that background. So it definitely helped because there was nobody else who had that expertise in my teams.
Mm. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, Shanka, for 2, 3, and 4 on the slide, just share one tactic for each of them. So make your work visible. What's one tactic someone can do?
Just learn how to write well. Uh,
Mm.
Ethan has a lot of good stuff on this, I believe. When you're writing, just be very, very precise, but and summarize things at the top, and then put the details for what people want to read right up. Just learn how to write well. Choose who to work with. Um, if you work at a big company, you will probably going to run into reorgs. You will probably run into people who you're not going to be friends with, but you have to figure out how to work with them. And sometimes you have to know if you are stuck in a dead end and everything you might try is all going to go into a black hole, and therefore choose your path out of it after you've tried everything else. Otherwise, know that you always have a choice. Even when you think you don't have a choice, that's a choice you're making. So so you really have to choose people who are going to be your advocates, going to sponsor, and they're going to create space for you to grow on your own terms without capping your growth. Uh, Last one, ignore hierarchy. I think I'll use a swear word. I really don't give a fuck about hierarchy. Like I don't care what your title is. I don't care, how long you've worked somewhere. What I really care about is if are you creating value for the company that you're working at where you are. And so this ignore hierarchy was what I was telling Jason was I never cared who was in the room, what they were saying. If And a very physical example of this is sometimes when people used to go into meeting rooms, if there was a partner or a CVP at Microsoft who was in the room, people would wait outside and not knock on the door. And I would just knock on the door, open the door, and go sit down if it was my meetings time and they were taking my time. And the reason is because I always felt if these guys knew what to do and they had all the answers, there's no need for me to have a job in this company. And so I think
Mm.
I always had this mentality, and this is what, and I'm making it a little blunt in a way so that the point comes across. But then you can also think of it as when you're in a meeting and you have a point of view, articulate the point of view, uh, and don't feel like something you have to hold yourself back because you don't have a certain title. You don't need anybody's permission. You don't need a certain title to do your best work. And you just do what you think is best for yourself and for the company and for the business, and the titles and promotions and everything will catch up.
Yeah, that one to me is so big because it falls in the bucket of waiting for people's permission. And if you
Yeah.
wait for permission, you're just gonna wait forever. Unless
Mhm.
you get that very special manager who brings you up with them and because they're bold. But you're right, someone has to be bold, and the first person that it has to be is yourself. I remember one time early in my career, uh, there was a discussion, hotly debated with a few execs, and I just spoke up and said something. And then the most senior executive in the room, we didn't really know each other. This person asked another person, which was quite visible, who was that just spoke? And at first, it could feel a little uncomfortable because they didn't know me. I obviously knew them. But afterwards, I got a note saying that was a very good point. Thank you for making it. I'm glad you're in the meetings. Please come to more. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would not have happened if I didn't speak up. And it was a short 2 sentence point of view based on with some data. Um, but that's the ignore hierarchy. I think is very important. Uh, I have to ask, where did you learn that? Did it just come naturally, or yeah?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when I joined Microsoft, I think I came after, I came after closing my startup. I had talked to enough people with flashy enough titles while running my company, and I knew most of the time everybody was winging it, no matter what their title and what they do.
Mm.
Pretty much everybody is winging it. I talked to like the biggest VCs and angel investors and founders, and nobody knew jack shit. So I think sort of it
It's
came from
true.
it sort of came from that. I didn't really care who you were, what your title was. If I have something to learn from you, I'll learn from you. Otherwise, I'm here to do a job, and I'll do that job to the best of my ability. And we shouldn't be running into. There's no reason why you would know something better than me just because you have a different title.
Yeah, that point, that everything in this world was made up by someone at some point, and most people have no idea what they're doing, is so important
Yeah.
for everyone to understand. And okay, so there's a few through lines I'm noticing with Shanka, right? It's you did the startup, and doing a startup and being the only salesperson is really tough, right? Try being a salesperson where everything is dependent on you, and you build a hard skin fast. Number two, the acting, and these are all intentional moves on your end to build skills, to build muscle in some parts, the acting, and then when you combine that, you can see why Shanka is bold and is willing to speak his mind. It's not that it just happened one day; it's because you built up into it. So that makes sense. Okay, let me see if there's anything else left on this deck, really quick. Let's see. Oh yeah, here's our link. I'll put our LinkedIn stuff in the. Hang on, bear with me. My computer's kind of slow. It's a lot of tabs
Yeah, no
open.
worries. I know you're over
We're
time,
kind
but
of, we're kind of doing Q&A.
I can stay a little bit longer, and there's some questions on the channel as well.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah. If you need to drop anytime.
no, I can stay
Let
on
me
until
end
I book
this.
this until 3. Let me see the questions.
Okay.
I think some of these get you branded as a rebel in the workplace, but it looks like it. Okay. So Mary, this is a good point. Some of these concepts gets you branded as a rebel. Is really knowing when to rebel and when to fall in line. So, you know, it's about being um selectively argumentative and belligerent. You're not doing it all the time. You're doing it when you know you will have maximum leverage and impact from doing it. If you do it all the time, you get branded as a dick, right? So it's really about having a balance. Uh, like I'll give you one example. Like I get assigned maybe 10 different things when I start as a junior engineer. Like you really have to know maybe 5 of those things are really important to do. The other 5 you can ignore. Like this is something actually I had to teach myself. When you come from school, you have to do good in everything. You have to get high grades in everything. When you come to work, you really have to do very well in like 2 or 3 or 4 different things, and the others you just have to do an average work. So, so if you just let those things drop, or if you just pick up, let's say you don't want to do certain things, and you have to be a little more belligerent in getting that task out of your plate, that's where you do it. You don't really do it in the high leverage, high impact work where you have to be seen in a more positive sense. So the net has to be positive, even though there might be, like individual elements which are negative. Again, negative is a nuanced word, but that's thing. Okay, how did you develop such strong public speaking and storytelling skills over time? Thank you, Sid. First of all, I think there's 3 things. One is practice. I asked Jason to send me the questions he was going to ask so that I could create some meaningful list of things to talk to all of you about. So it's definitely practice in any situation. And I would the second thing is the art of storytelling hasn't changed in like 5,000, 10,000 years. There's 3 key elements: ethos, logos, pathos. Ethos is your credibility and the trust you have built around you. Jason sort of did that in the beginning by flashing my title and all of that stuff. It means nothing to me, but in many cases it might look like, okay, this person knows whatever the hell he's going to talk about. Second one is logos, which is data, and logic and all of that thing. And third is pathos, the emotion that you really help people feel. Think of these three as as ingredients, and the way you combine them, you get different recipes out of them. A lot of ethos, little bit of logos, little bit of pathos. You have one recipe. If you combine them in different ways, you get different ways to talk about it. Um, I'm just going through the chat. I'm answering the questions.
All right.
Somebody made a good comment. Imagine Jeff Bezos with the title of intern. Does he act like Jeff or an intern? Which is a very good question. Very good point. Um,
Well, okay. On that point,
your
the
point?
alter ego. Have an alter ego, right? Kobe
Uh,
Bryant, Black Mamba. Uh,
Very,
Beyonce has one, but I'm forgetting it. So don't if you place yourself as an intern, yeah, you might act like an intern. So don't do that.
yeah. Okay, I'm just going through. If there's other questions, please speak up, or Jason, feel free to read them out to me. I'm just going through some
Let's
stuff.
see. Any of these tactics that you talked about that do not apply to the more senior levels? I think they all do. You have to wield it differently and more thoughtfully, depending on who the audience is. But I would
Yes.
say my short answer is they all broadly apply. These are not level specific,
Yeah,
um, yeah, practices.
I agree. I totally agree. All of these, again, take all of these and you have to make it your own. These are things that work for me. You have to make it your own, and you have to be true to your own values and to your own way of working. You can't. So I think I would definitely tell you that don't take everything literally. Like, you might not be the kind of person who knocks in the door on the door and tells an CVB to, hey, this is my meeting now, right? And that's really okay. Uh, you might find your bravery in something else. You might find your voice in doing something else in a different way. I
Hmm.
was I was I was pretty I think earlier on I got this feedback a lot that I was very abrasive with a lot of people. And probably knocking on the door and telling us CVP to get the fuck out of the room was probably part of me being abrasive. Now I'm not. Now I'm really, really nice. So, so and I don't know if
uh,
I would still do that. I'll just be a lot nicer with such things. Because if, I don't want to wait. Like I said, I'm lazy and I don't want to waste time. If I'm waiting outside a meeting room for like 10 minutes for you to come out, no, you don't own this room. It's my room right now. So, but you can approach it differently. You can talk about it differently. This is
mm,
a good question. What if others care too much about hierarchy and not you? The culture is different from your values. Yeah, this is a good question. In a way, I found I thought I could get away with doing such things because there were people around me who were also a little abrasive.
mhm.
And I knew that these guys were still doing well. And it's not like I'm naturally an abrasive person. Jason has met me in person. He knows how mellow I am, right? So, but I think like that maybe it was some kind of this alternate ego or something where I just didn't want to waste time doing things. I didn't want to waste time at work beyond what I had to. I wanted to create. I just had a priority, and I wanted to work according to that priority. So, uh, which means essentially you have to become like water. So if others around you care too much about hierarchy, you have to figure out how to navigate that world. And I am in such a world right now in Salesforce. Like, here it is extremely hierarchical. And a lot of the things I did when I was younger, earlier in my career, they don't really work that well now. I have to follow a different set of patterns, a different set of I still have the same outcome, but I have to take different set of steps to influence the guy who reports to Benioff, right? But ultimately really about being like water, mixing with the situation that you're in.
All right. Well, this was meant to be 30 minutes and we went way over. So thank you for your time, Shanka.
Absolutely.
Uh, if you had to leave this group with one last piece of advice, anything you'd want them to remember?
Yeah, I would say don't wait for permission to do your best work. Do what you think is the right thing to do, and try your best to do it in a way that everybody thinks about you in a positive way. But don't wait for permission. Do your best work now where you are with what you have, and things have a way of like making way for you, especially in big companies. If you're in a smaller company, this is always true. You have to do it anyway. You just have to pick up everything that needs to be done. In a bigger company, just don't wait for permission. Do it, and things will work out your way.
I agree. Thanks, Shanka. And we'll there's a someone says there's a HBR book in the making here from Shanka, so we'll look
There
out for
is.
that in the future.
So, maybe I'll write something.
All
Thank you,
right.
everyone. Thanks,
Thanks,
Jason.
everyone. Thanks, Shanka. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.